The fire wasn't supposed to happen. At least, that's what they told the news cameras. But the moment I stepped into the ruins of what used to be my living room, I knew the truth. The smell of wet ash hit me first, thick and smoky, clinging to my clothes like a guilty secret. The wind pushed through the burnt-out walls, whistling across the broken beams like the house itself was trying to speak. Glass crunched under my boots as I moved deeper inside. Shattered windows lay everywhere, tiny pieces catching the late afternoon light. Each shard used to frame the mountain sunrises I woke up to every morning. Now they were just reminders of what someone stole from me, and the security footage left no room for guessing. There she was, the HOA president, Patricia Blackwood, standing by the edge of my porch with her arms crossed, barking orders like she owned the whole valley. She called it a controlled burn, said my house was a danger, an eyesore, that she had no choice. Funny thing, my home had passed every fire inspection with perfect scores, but they made one mistake when they brought fire to my door. They never asked what I did before I retired. They never asked why people used to get quiet when I walked into a courtroom. They never asked how many crooked officials I'd sent to prison. If they had, maybe they would have thought twice before lighting the match. Let me take you back 6 months, before the flames, before the lies, before the whole valley learned who I really was. My name is Samuel Riverside, but folks call me Sam. I'm 58 years old, and I came to Pinecrest Valley, Colorado for peace. Real peace. The kind you feel deep in your bones when the morning air tastes like pine needles and cold water. My grandfather bought these 40 acres back in the 50s, long before anyone had ever whispered the words HOA. I spent 2 years fixing up the old cabin. Solar panels on the roof, a rainwater system good enough for a small town, a garden that fed me better than any grocery store. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect. But it was mine. Then she showed up. I smelled her perfume before I heard her BMW tires on my gravel driveway. Sharp, floral, expensive, the kind of smell that punches the air out of a room. When she stepped out, her heels sank straight into the dirt, like even the land refused to hold her up. "You must be the holdout," she said, smiling like she was cutting me open with her teeth. "I'm Patricia Blackwood, president of the Pinecrest Valley Homeowners Association." I wiped my hands on an old work rag. I'd been adjusting my solar panels. "Sam Riverside," I said. "Nice to meet you. But before you start, let's clear one thing up. My property isn't under your HOA. It predates everything around here." Her eyes scanned my cabin, my land, my garden, not with curiosity, with calculation. "We'll see about that, mountain man." She walked back to her BMW, her heels clicking against my driveway rocks like tiny gunshots. That should have been my warning. But I'd spent 20 years in federal courtrooms. I'd forgotten people this petty existed. The next week, the trouble started. Anonymous complaints began pouring into the county office. Zoning violations, septic issues, building code violations, all fake. But they sent inspectors anyway. One uniform after another walked through my front door, their boots tracking dust on my floor, their faces scrunched in confusion when they found nothing wrong. Every morning I woke up to something new. A fresh notice taped to my door, a letter in the mailbox, a strange truck parked across the road. And then, one morning, I found surveyor stakes hammered into the ground near my fence line. Red plastic flags fluttered in the breeze, little markers, little warnings. That's when I stopped thinking of Patricia as a nuisance and started seeing her as a threat. See, I sent criminals to prison for 2 decades. Crooked mayors, dirty councilmen, developers who thought they were smarter than the law. I knew the smell of corruption long before I saw it, and Patricia reeked of it. Fast forward to the day she made her first big move. I was grilling burgers for my grandson's 8th birthday. Kids were laughing, running around the yard. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass. Then a process server walked up to my gate holding a thick envelope. "Samuel Riverside?" he asked, shifting awkwardly as my grandson stared up at him with ketchup on his face. "You're being served. Water rights violations. Allegedly draining the whole community supply. Total nonsense. We all had independent wells. But Patricia had hired an attorney with a name fancy enough to scare most folks. By the next morning, Channel 7 News had labeled me a water-stealing recluse. But what Patricia didn't know was that while she was busy playing neighborhood tyrant, I was busy gathering evidence, phone calls, records, financial reports, complaints, back-channel conversations. And one thing became very clear. Patricia Blackwood wasn't just running an HOA, she was running a scheme. And she'd picked the wrong man to corner. I learned a long time ago that bullies always push until someone pushes back harder. So the day after the news dragged my name through the mud, I walked into court with the same calm I used back when I wore the black robe. Patricia arrived with her fancy lawyer, Winston Cartwright III. The man's suit looked more expensive than his arguments. He carried himself like he'd already won. But the moment Judge Martinez called the case, I watched his confidence shrink like plastic in a fire. My brief was airtight, my evidence perfect, my tone steady. I'd spent 20 years dismantling lies for a living, and Patricia had handed me plenty to work with. When I presented the geological survey proving nobody's wells were connected, the courtroom went silent, except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. Even the clerk stopped typing. Judge Martinez removed his glasses, leaned back and sighed like he'd seen this kind of nonsense too many times. "Case dismissed with prejudice," he said. Defendant awarded full legal fees. Patricia's jaw clenched so hard I thought her expensive veneers might crack. Outside the courthouse, she waited for me by my truck. Her perfume hit me first, followed by her voice. Sharp, cold, shaking with fury. "You think you're clever," she hissed, jabbing a finger at my chest. "This isn't over, Sam. I'm going to make your life miserable until you beg to leave." She stomped off, her heels smacking the asphalt like angry little hammers. Her BMW peeled out, leaving tire marks that probably violated half a dozen town ordinances. I should have known then that she'd do worse than file fake complaints. But I was still thinking like a retired man looking for peace, not the judge who'd once taken down a governor for bribery. Patricia was just getting warmed up. The harassment grew fast. One Tuesday morning, I woke up to silence. No lights, no hum of the fridge, no power. The electric company told me the HOA had claimed I needed an emergency disconnection for safety repairs. My entire system was fine, but someone had tampered with the lines at 2 in the morning. Caught perfectly on my security cameras. Flashlights, coveralls, whispering voices. Patricia's crew. By Thursday, road crews blocked off my driveway. Supposedly urgent repairs. All day, machines sat idle while workers lounged around drinking coffee. They never touched the road. My mailbox filled with missed deliveries. Groceries had to be hauled in by foot. The smell of hot tar and diesel followed me everywhere. And then the EPA showed up. A sweating little investigator named Bradley claimed my solar panels were polluting groundwater. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Only later did I learn he was Patricia's brother-in-law. That's when the old instincts kicked in. The judge instincts. A judge doesn't guess. A judge investigates. So I started digging. Public records, real estate filings, financial statements, every late-night whispering phone call, every permit filed with shaky signatures, every suspicious HOA invoice. Patricia was dirtier than a septic tank. Ethics violations on her real estate license. Unexplained expenses in HOA books. A development plan worth millions if my land suddenly became available. And rumors. Lots of rumors. People scared to speak. Fines for things like garden gnomes. Threats over mailbox colors. A widow who cried when she said Patricia fined her for growing tomatoes. Bullies always leave bruises on other people. I wasn't the first, I was just the only one willing to hit back. But Patricia raised the stakes. I was throwing a small birthday party for my grandson. Balloons, burgers, the whole thing. Kids laughed, the grill smoked, and the air smelled like pine in summer. Then a process server walked in, holding fresh papers. More accusations. More lies. The timing wasn't random. Patricia wanted humiliation, wanted to ruin the day. My daughter looked at me with worry. My grandson looked confused. And in that moment, standing in front of family I loved, something inside me hardened. The same thing that hardened the first time I saw a corrupt mayor try to bully a witness. Patricia made this personal. And I don't lose personal fights. That night, the Valley got loud online. Channel 7 ran a segment calling me a secretive landowner harming neighbors. Reporters stood on the road outside my house, their lights glowing like fireflies. I said nothing. Because I knew something Patricia didn't. I wasn't alone. Behind the fear in people's voices, behind the whispered apologies from neighbors forced into silence, something was shifting. People were tired, angry, ready. And then came the break I didn't expect. An elderly woman, hair silver and hands shaking, knocked on my door holding 3 old banker's boxes. Her name was Margaret Taylor, but neighbors called her Maggie. She'd been on the HOA board years before Patricia took over. She smelled faintly of lavender lotion and old books. "Judge Riverside," she whispered, as if saying it was a weight lifted. "I know who you are, and I think it's time someone helped you." Inside those boxes were records, real records, the kind corrupt people forget about. Original HOA bylaws, financial statements, meeting minutes. Even recordings Maggie had secretly taken when Patricia thought she wasn't being watched. As she placed the boxes on my kitchen table, her eyes filled with something fierce, something determined. "I've been waiting for someone strong enough to take her down," she said. "And you're the only one she's scared of." Quote, I didn't know it yet, but those boxes would become the fuse. And Patricia was sitting on a powder keg. When Maggie placed those banker's boxes on my kitchen table, I could almost feel the weight of every neighbor Patricia had hurt. The papers smelled faintly of old ink and dust, the kind of scent you find in forgotten archives and quiet libraries. Inside those boxes was the truth. A truth Patricia had spent years burying beneath forged signatures, fake fines, and intimidation. By the next morning, my home had turned into a command center. I pinned documents to the walls, laid out timelines across the counter, and taped audio transcripts to the refrigerator door. Red strings connected names to dates, dates to transactions, transactions to crimes. And through it all, one thing became clear. Patricia wasn't running an HOA. She was running a criminal enterprise, illegal fees, fraudulent assessments, money laundering through a fake company she controlled, kickbacks to developers, and a plan to seize land, including mine, so she could push a multi-million-dollar subdivision deal. But the worst part, she'd used fear as her weapon. She threatened widows, bullied single moms, harassed elderly veterans, and anyone who questioned her got hit with fines, liens, and threats. Not anymore. The next few weeks felt like preparing for trial again. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now came forward quietly, like survivors in some strange unofficial support group. They shared their stories in hushed voices in my living room, hands shaking, voices breaking. A retired teacher who'd been fined for her American flag. A military widow forced to remove her swing set. A young couple told their biracial children, quote, ruined the neighborhood's aesthetic unity. Those stories hit hard. Harder than any courtroom testimony I'd heard. Meanwhile, Patricia was spiraling. She hired a PR firm to smear me online, accusing me of criminal pasts, bribery, corruption. Fake accounts spread rumors faster than wildfire. Anonymous letters hit my daughter's office. Someone spray-painted, "Get out, corrupt judge," across my fence. But the more she pushed, the more neighbors pushed back. People started attending meetings again. Quiet residents grew brave. Maggie gathered signatures demanding transparency. Tank Morrison, big as a pickup truck, hands rough as gravel, showed up and volunteered to fix my fence free of charge. Even kids from the neighborhood brought drawings labeled, "Stop the HOA Bully." And for the first time in years, Patricia wasn't being feared, she was being exposed. But exposure wasn't enough for her. She needed control. And control required desperation. One evening, her BMW rolled into my driveway, engine humming like an angry mosquito. She stepped out wearing too much perfume and carrying a thick envelope. "Sam," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's be reasonable." Inside the envelope was $50,000 in cash. "Sell your land, walk away, everyone wins." When I refused, her mask slipped. "You think you're untouchable," she snapped. "I will destroy your life. I will ruin you. You don't know who you're dealing with." The whole conversation recorded perfectly on my security cameras. She should have known better. Threatening a federal judge is a federal crime. But Patricia didn't stop at threats. She moved to violence. At 2 in the morning, during a planned HOA power outage, a man named Denny, an unstable ex-contractor, showed up to torch my home. He soaked the foundation in accelerants, tripping over himself as he muttered that she said this would fix everything. He thought he was alone. He wasn't. The fire crews and state investigators waiting in the dark caught everything. Every splash of gasoline, every whisper, every spark. By sunrise, my home was gone. Burned. Destroyed. Reduced to a charred skeleton of memories and ash, the air smelled of smoke, melted wires, and betrayal. Neighbors gathered in tears. Mrs. Peterson sobbed into Tank's arms. Even people who once sided with Patricia looked horrified. Denny was arrested on the spot. And he flipped instantly. Patricia paid him. In cash. With instructions, she wanted me gone. But she didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I'd done. She didn't know why criminals in 3 states used to whisper my name the same way people whisper ghost stories. The night after the fire, Patricia made her final mistake. She went on live TV and accused me, of burning down my own home for insurance money. She didn't know federal agents were already listening, or that her phone was tapped, or that every lie she spoke added minutes to her future prison sentence. 2 days later came the town hall meeting. Over 400 residents packed the civic center. The air was thick with tension, and the smell of too many bodies crammed into old leather chairs. Camera crews lined the aisles. Reporters whispered. Federal agents stood quietly along the walls. Then I walked in. The applause hit like thunder. People clapped, stood, cheered. Some even cried. Patricia froze in her front row seat, makeup perfect, hands trembling just a little. When I stepped to the microphone, the room went still. "My name," I said, "is Judge Samuel Riverside, Western District of Colorado, retired." A collective gasp rippled across the room, but Patricia, her face drained white. For the next 10 minutes, I laid out everything. The fraud, the threats, the harassment, the illegal fees, the discrimination, the forged documents, the money laundering, the shell companies, the arson conspiracy. I played recordings, showed receipts, projected screenshots. Neighbors gasped. Some cried. Some shook with anger. "And Patricia?" she snapped. "He's lying," she screamed, leaping to her feet. "All of you are sheep. I protected you. I built this community." Security moved fast. Federal agents moved faster. They placed her in cuffs as she kicked and screamed and cursed the whole valley for betraying her. And in that moment, the neighborhood finally exhaled. The tyrant was gone. 6 months later, justice was delivered. Patricia got 15 years in federal prison. Her partners were charged, her lawyer disbarred, her developer friends indicted. My house, rebuilt, stronger, better, fireproofed. And with a community meeting room where neighbors gather every Sunday for potlucks and laughter. People tell me I saved the neighborhood. But the truth? They saved each other. All I did was shine light in the dark. And bullies can't survive the light.